the meeting to order and take the short roll call. Miranda?
Carol,
Here.
Manning, Gill, Glassburner, here. Woodhouse,
Here.
Turk,
Here.
Frank, Williamson, Bowie.
Here.
Great, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for a quorum, sir.
Very good. And are we in compliance with the open meetings law?
Yes, sir.
Very good. And before us, we have an 11-point agenda. Motion to approve the agenda. Motion by Glassbrenner, second by Woodhouse. You get the next one. To approve our agenda as presented, all in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, we should have minutes from the January 14th meeting. Anybody have any corrections, updates on those minutes? If not, we'll declare those to be approved. Item 6, public comment. Any member of the public wish to comment here for the meeting? Anybody online? Anybody? We don't have anybody here in person that's a member of the public. So we'll move on to item 7, report on tax deed properties.
So I can only assume this is actually an update on one particular property, which I will admit is problematic. We seized it a while ago, probably a year and a half ago at this point, maybe a little more. And at the time it was occupied. I had correspondence with the occupant. I was not able to resolve it without then being forced to pursue legal action. Without getting too into the weeds, I used a particular legal argument that was not simply an eviction. The judge did not find that argument persuasive and felt more comfortable pursuing it as an eviction action. And so I dismissed the action I had started and was going to refile as an eviction. And just that had not been a priority for some time. But it's coming up on things to do because the new occupant or the remaining occupant is operating some kind of stove or fireplace that may be improperly vented. So while I prepare the eviction against whomever the current occupant is, I've also engaged with the city for possible code enforcement actions. One way or another, we'll end up with an empty building. It's just there is a moratorium on evictions get through the winter months. And even though this isn't like a landlord-tenant relationship, I am moving forward with the understanding that that moratorium would be part of any court order. So it will likely be warmer before we see any actual movement on that. And then, of course, in Wisconsin, the sheriff is the only person who can remove someone from a property. So once I receive the court order, that will go to Sheriff Porter and will be executed. The order, not the occupant.
Mr. Harrell.
So when does that moratorium typically end each year?
It has been a long time since I've represented a landlord, so I don't know off the top of my head.
Does it coincide with like the utility shutoff moratorium?
Yeah.
Which
It's the same idea behind it. We don't want people freezing to death.
Sure.
That was getting to the point where I understood the judge was not going to move forward with a legal argument. It took me into winter last time, and then other things popped up. There was moving and
Nothing kind of critical about this right now.
Nope. Again, the operation of the fireplace is concerning, but in my understanding, it's been going on for a while. It's not an endorsement of it, but if it were so poorly put together that it was immediately going to catch on fire, it would have done so already. But there's a lot of, obviously, the neighbors and such are in touch with their representatives who have been in touch with me, and rest assured it is a priority.
Questions on that update?
No action then.
No action. Okay. So item 8 is discussion and possible action update on ethics board. So that's back to you again.
Work proceeds apace on creating, revising, stealing an ethics ordinance, 2 ethics ordinances. I don't have a draft for you tonight. But if you just go back to the Iowa County one, know that I'm using that as the base and then revising it to comport with the direction I was given at the last meeting. The one question I had come up that I would like some discussion on tonight is for the employee side of it. Do we want that to be an ordinance with the force of law, or do we want that to be an employment policy, or both? And the difference would be, if it's an ordinance, then somebody who violates it, an employee who violates it, could theoretically be subjected to forfeiture or other penalties prescribed by statute. But if it's simply an employment policy, then they would just be subject to disciplinary action under the employment policy. So do you want the authority to, you'll have the authority, well, the administrator would have the authority to terminate someone for a violation of it, but do you want the authority to pursue it as a violation of law, the equivalent of a disorderly conduct or something like that?
Mr. Carroll. Employee handbook, there's some overlap with what I assume is in there in terms of proscribed behaviors or activities, repercussions and all that. So I just wonder if we should see what that says too.
And that's fair. I know that there's a conflict of interest policy in there. And the other thing I'll note is that a lot of this is also covered by state statute. So any public employee who engages in, self-dealing or things like that is possibly could be pursued under state action. This would be simply to allow either the district attorney or corporation counsel to pursue it on the county's behalf.
What do most counties do?
As far as I can tell in my review of the ethics ordinances, it's kind of all over the board. Most of them will simply have one ethics ordinance that applies to either only public officials, in which case I have to presume that any ethics guidance would be in their employee handbooks, which are not necessarily accessible to me, or their ethics ordinance explicitly spells out that it applies to employees as well. So it's just whichever side they land on.
I guess my thought would be if somebody brought forth an ethical concern involving an employee, would we want to take any legal action if there weren't legalities involved? Or would we just entirely look at it as a disciplinary matter, which we have jurisdiction over to be able to discipline them?
I mean, that would be I think I would agree with that, because if it was going to violate something legally, we were going to do that anyways. So I don't really see the need to add an extra provision.
And, these provisions as they apply to employees tend to include, similar to the rules of the board, something stating that basically if it rises to a certain level of severity, it can be referred to other entities. And so if you just place it in the employee handbook, the advantage to that is that it could come to this committee or another designated committee rather than, potentially before the judge. So it would be in-house, I guess.
I thought that's kind of where we were falling anyways, that we were thinking. I thought at the last discussion, we were talking about that anyways, that having finance and executive handle the employee ethics issues, correct?
I think that's what we talked about as opposed to the ethics board, but I don't think we differentiated whether it was ordinance or just.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Because this would be sort of a niche case in what otherwise would fall under the administrator's authority. So generally, disciplinary action against an employee would fall under the administrator's authority, but a violation of an ethics policy or ethics ordinance could be prescribed to a committee of the board.
See, that's why I need to see the employee handbook.
Well, right now, where do we have our employees ethics?
We haven't differentiated, or is it just
Yeah,
rolled in?
It's just in the employee handbook.
it is in the employee handbook.
I believe
So it's separate from our county board one? I can't remember, because before.
That was a
we were the
conversation.
team that was doing all the ethics, so I feel like they were together. But no, I don't. Mark, do you remember?
I don't, in the past, all that ethics stuff, if we would have had anything ethics, it would have went to finance and personnel. But, that's,
I'm just trying to remember when we redid the ethics ordinance, if that was specifically just for county board or if we had included employees.
To my recollection, we weren't specific, which,
I would agree.
yeah,
Part of our problem is nothing has come up for us to run
Right.
through all this.
but it would be good to have it defined in the event.
Yeah,
that-
I agree. I agree.
The only thing we've had recent history come up was involving a board member, so it wasn't an employee. And as Mike said, when we've had issues with employees in the past, it hasn't necessarily been an ethics issue, but it's been a disciplinary matter and it was dealt with.
Yeah.
But if you had an outside individual bring an ethical complaint against a county employee, we should define if that's in the employee handbook that, okay, that goes to the administrator or whatever.
What makes the most sense to you? I mean, or is maybe the smoothest way to do it?
Having it be an employment policy,
Yeah.
that way you have, exclusive and overarching control over it. If it's too bad, if someone's selling county equipment out of the back of a highway shop or something like that, that's a potential referral for potentially criminal.
Would the policy refer to our ethics ordinance and say, and then just make specific provisions for employees? Or would it be like basically rewritten within the employee handbook?
I would want to rewrite it,
Okay.
just, so everyone has access to the same degree of clarity, maybe with a reference to the ethics ordinance. In the event that someone qualifies as both an employee or a public official, know that they could potentially be subject to liability under both provisions.
And it would be good for there to be harmony between the two as well.
Yes.
Makes sense to me. Sounds good to me.
So I think I want to request we get the employee handbook, put in our iPads so we can look at it.
Well, and not to get off topic here, but that may be something that I think overarchingly, our policies are out of date. And I know that that's something that's come up frequently. We discovered that there are two completely different versions of the administrative manual that guides department heads on how they're supposed to do their jobs. And nobody can explain why. And so there was a very confusing conversation where I was advising on this particular way of doing things and somebody was reading off language and I was like, where are you getting that? Well, in the manual, this section, I'm reading that exact same thing. So we need to update our personnel policies.
There is an old handbook in our folders, but it's the last it was updated. Yes,
I couldn't find it.
the last it was updated was 2019. Is that the most current one that we have? And so
I
it
don't
is
want
in-
to commit to an answer on that.
Well, that's what we have.
Yeah.
It's in okay. If you go back out until you're in the section where it has all the years, 2013,
Yeah.
okay, scroll down to where it says admin documents,
Yep.
click on that folder, then click on the ZZ archived items
Oh,
folder,
well,
and then click on the old handbooks folder, and there you go.
okay. Of course, I would look at archive.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Is it old?
But I don't
matters?
know if that's the current one, and I thought they used to have it on the website under the. Let me check.
When we get to item 10.
Yeah, I hear you.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes, go ahead, Sandy.
sorry to butt in, but the one that I received when I came on the county board is Handbook of Personnel Policies and Work Rules of Richland County, and they updated it the 25th of October, 2022.
Okay. So that would be a newer version.
And it's not in our iPads that I can find.
Yeah.
How did you receive that, Sandy?
It was given to us when we had like our incoming briefing before we
Like,
met.
was it a physical copy or on the,
Oh, yeah.
There you
hard
go.
copy.
Okay.
hey, hold on though, maybe it's in the orientation folder.
Uh-huh.
Let me check. Well, there's nothing under welcome packet and materials. That's empty. It doesn't look like we have anything. Okay. And that one, what did you say? What year was that updated?
October of 2022.
Okay, so that's not been currently on our iPad. Doesn't look like.
And it says it's developed by Finance and Personnel Committee in collaboration with county department heads, elected and appointed officials and employee representatives.
I'm sure it was. So yeah, that's something we'll want to address as a future agenda item.
Wait, I found it. But I have no idea. I just searched it. I have no idea what folder it's in. But it says 10 of 2022.
Okay.
I don't know. Okay, so if you search employee handbook.
You shouldn't have to go on a news trip.
No,
Yes.
oh, well, somebody's supposed to be getting a computer here at some point to try it out, so
Ellen, I'm-
we shall see. All right, did you need, I mean, was that enough for you then?
That was it. Yep.
Okay,
All right, any other questions on the topic of moving towards the ethics board?
no, I mean, I guess basically what we're giving you direction is then that we have planned to split the two things so that there will be an ethics board for county, for county officials, and then most likely this particular committee would handle employee. Are we going to be taking that to the county, to board to decide? I mean, I don't remember how we did that. Did we
Decide
vote
to
on
set
it?
up an ethics board, we'll have to take that to the full board for
Yeah,
approval.
because we didn't vote on our process for the ethics board either yet, right?
Not yet. We're under that deadline of March 15th, I believe it is.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So
Okay.
no later than probably the last meeting in February or the first meeting of this committee in March. We
Okay.
need to have a decision to take to the full board because as per our previous action approved by the board as of March 15th, we will no longer have an ethics board. So
And just real quick to run through the guidance I got last time, the board will be appointed by the Committee on Committees. It will consist of 5 members and 1 alternate. 1 member shall be an attorney or someone trained in the process of due process used in judicial or quasi-judicial proceedings. And there's no employees, officials, or anyone who receives the majority of their income from the county allowed to serve.
Did we specify previous employees? I remember having.
There was
discussed
no,
them.
there was talk about how there shouldn't be any connection between that body and the county.
I do remember we discussed like a window of time or something from the last time.
I think 2 years.
2 years is what
But
we.
then I feel like we landed on maybe none at all.
I don't remember the final.
I don't
Do you
know if we
remember?
decided, I mean, I
Or
remember
we
the
discussed.
discussion, that discussion. You know, when.
Well, we can settle on that language once we get a draft ordinance.
Or even present that portion too, to see what other.
And even if it's not spelled out in there, it is certainly something that can be taken under consideration during the appointment process. So, like, for example, the Secretary of Defense can't be a current member of the armed services or having served, but there's a waiver process. So very similar. This person worked for the county up until a week ago. They got fired because they got in a screaming match with the county board supervisor.
Right.
That's maybe not someone we'd want serving on the ethics board that's going to have authority over that supervisor.
I do feel like though, it would be helpful to have it clearly spelled out, just so there's no cause for any kind of implication of like committee on committees being biased, or, you know what I mean? Like stacking the deck of the ethics board, in other words.
Complain about the ethics board, where do you take that?
Yeah, exactly. The appointment of the ethics board, now we have a problem. I don't know where we go. That's- Mhm.
And all for something that we haven't had to deal with, but
No, and
if we
hopefully
do
all
nothing
these
about it,
will-
then we'll have something. That's what we prefer.
If I may, would it be helpful for the entire board and, you know, and the public to really understand what we're talking about here, when we say ethics, and just make sure we define this, you know,
I think that's-
our definition and the difference between a code of conduct violation and an ethical violation. What
Yes.
is that? Because that just might provide some clarity as we,
Yeah,
you know, for, you know, to make some confusion about that.
I think that would be helpful just for our supervisors as well, because we do have it specified now, the code of conduct, which is
It's part of
policed by our own
ordinance,
board.
And it is codified in ordinance, so.
Right. And
Right.
so that would be separate, like you said, from
Yep.
ethics.
That's part of how all of this started, a
Right.
supervisor engaged in behavior that was not ethical, ethically concerning, at least as prescribed by Wisconsin statute, but was not, it did not shed the most favorable light on the county either. And there was no mechanism to address that within the county. So that was kind of the origins of this.
Yeah.
It's fun, isn't it, Steve? All right, any other comments on that?
So when we get this to the point where we're bringing it before the county board, I should be prepared to give just a spiel on the difference between code of conduct and ethics and what are ethics.
Yeah.
That would be very helpful.
Make it as simple as possible.
Yeah.
Well, fortunately, I mean, what are ethics is kind of a philosophical debate that we could engage in for our entire span of human history.
It's not.
But we've got statutory references, so I will limit it to those.
To item 9, any correspondence? Have none. Future agenda items, item 10. Yes, Mr. Carroll.
Access and organization of all of the different files that we need to look at for reference on our iPads.
Yeah. We had specific mention of the county employee handbook or policy or whatever it is.
Example. And
And
overall, the overall organization and the intent and for what we're supposed to be able to access.
And I think separate from that, even along the same lines, but separate, what Larry brought up at the last county board meeting about where could we use extra resources to support our interim admin team? If we could find some extra resources to help us coordinate those divergent policies and get them all rolled into one, maybe that's something we could look at pursuing.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So another thing, I feel like this is really poor timing because obviously we're dealing with, having interim administrator that's completely stretched. So this is really something that we need to keep on mind for later. The problem is it's overdue. We had been talking about going back again and looking at strategic planning along with our capital improvement and all of those and how that will work together and updating our current plan and basically direction for the administration and the board. And I think our last plan was done was it this year or was it last year? That the strategic plan went through. Anyways, I know we're overdue, basically. And so even though obviously the next few months we need to just get an actual administration in place, we need to have that on the forefront of our minds as far as because that will help, I believe, the new administration to
Right. And we
Keep
just got a
going.
comprehensive plan done, so.
exactly. So they should, in my mind, all be tying together.
Okay.
And I don't want to lose sight of that or, forget it.
Yeah.
So as an agenda item then?
I don't know how that looks.
Well,
But maybe it's,
Agenda item could be discussion of it.
yeah,
Or set a timeline.
right, that would be helpful.
So I understand that correctly.
No, that's fine. I was verbally processing.
Okay. How would you like that to appear?
Maybe this,
Discussion of timeline for update of county strategic plan.
there we go, that sounds good. I don't remember, what all did Candace say we were waiting on in order to do that? I think wages and stuff was part of it, but then there was something else.
I'm trying to think if there were specific items for that we were waiting on, or was it just that we were busy with other things?
Well, I feel like there were certain things she wanted in place before we really looked at the bigger picture. Was it?
Yeah, the wage setting was probably one of
Facilities
those.
usage and how that relates to campus. I mean, I remember that being
The needs,
discussed.
space
Yeah, the
needs.
space
It was-
needs.
Survey of department heads or something too,
I don't recall.
That,
it's terrible, I should take more notes.
there's a plan for that as it relates to revision of these employment policies.
I feel like I remember her referencing that, wanting that to play into whatever our strategic plan is. So, because part of what we're gonna be looking at is obviously the continued restructuring that we've been doing. And so needing feedback from the employees on that as well.
Any other future agenda items? If not, then we're now to item number 11, looking for a motion to adjourn. Motion by Caro, second by Glassbrenner. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Hi, Mark.
Bye, Sandy.
Hi, Sandy. At the last meeting, or one of the recent meetings, you guys mentioned